working on a Assault 2012 Switchback. We're going to put Airframe ring boards on this. On the Assault Switchback, you have to drop the skid in order to grind out the self-piercing rivets for the tunnel supports. First thing we're going to do is we're going to drill out all the rivets. On the Switchback Assault, you've got the foot block offs here. You're just going to need to drill out these 3 rivets, and then we're going to end up cutting up in here. We're going to cut this, and this will all just be discarded. Okay, the self-piercing rivets that are holding on the braces, the tunnel braces, the best way to get them off is use a pretty coarse grit sanding disc and just sand these back sides down here. There should be, I think, 2, 4, 6 of them, and then the whole thing will just fall out. You can drill them out, but it leaves pieces and it's not as clean. Okay, so you can see here we ground it down far enough that it popped for us, and that one's free. So we're going to move to the next one. We're going to do them all, but that's what you're looking for. Okay. So these popped. The one on the inside, I didn't shave as much off of it because obviously the vertical portion of the tunnel is staying in place. So we're going to have to just kind of pop it and work it a little bit. Okay, we've got all the rivets drilled out that need to be drilled out. Next step is going to be to unbolt the front and the back rail, remove it. $10mm socket. With the side panel removed, we're going to remove this Torx screw. Okay, up front we just got the same thing, 10mm socket. We'll take off these two nuts here, and that's fantastic. Okay, we're gonna pull this back. Side rail comes off. All right, we're gonna strike a line here, pencil, marker, whatever, across that top of that opening, because we're going to cut there. Just so you got a guide here, we're just going to zip this and this off carefully with a die grinder, because you know you only got this much play. So just be careful when you're doing it, not to cut through and hit the tunnel. I mean, down here is not going to matter because you're discarding it. But okay, so I got a piece of 1/2-inch PVC. Actually works out really good as how far I want to be away from the tunnel. I'm just going to mark it. Okay, all I'm going to do here is I'm just going to drop the die grinder in. Gives me a nice, fresh, clean place to start cutting with the air saw. Okay. All right, so so probably one of the most important things about this whole thing, this whole process, is you got your drop bracket below here. You don't want to cut through that. That's extremely important. I can see through this, I can see it. So I'm just gonna make a mark right here as a note to myself. When I start cutting, stop there. Same thing on this side, not quite as easy to see, but I know it's right here, making a mark. What we're gonna do is then take a die grinder and score this area until we can just bend it back and forth and pop it off. We're going to go ahead and score this section. We've cut the back, we've cut the front. Okay, so now we've got the board cut off completely. Just taking a 90-degree grinder here, we're going to clean up the edge. Okay, so we got the new board dry fitted in place. We put the bolts back in the back here. I'm going to put the carriage bolts back in the front. And I'm going to snug up the nuts, but I'm not going to tighten them because we still want to be able to manipulate the boards to tighten it up against the tunnel. First thing you're going to want to do is get some clamps. You want to suck the board down to the drop bracket here so it's nice and tight to drill your first hole. So the way Skinz wants you to install this, or install the rivets, is every 2 inches put a rivet. So you start marking every 2 inches. Yep. Okay, now you're going to want to clamp this. Make sure the board is tight up against the vertical portion and that's flat to the lip that you left. Then go ahead and drill out 3/16 holes. And I like to do a couple, 2 or 3 at a time, then move the clamp and do it some more. Okay, all the rivets are in every 2 inches on the bottom side. We're going to work on trimming up the plastic there, putting a couple more rivets in for the belly pan, and tightening up the bolts. Okay, up in here there's a tab welded onto the front side of this tube. That's to reattach the block off plates. So what I'm going to do is, there's really no science to it, you're just going to kind of measure it and do your best as to getting it as close to where it needs to be and pop a couple rivets. Okay, this is a step you don't have to do, but I'm going to. You got all this extra plastic up here, it is going to gather snow, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to trim a chunk of this out so that it doesn't collect snow. Alright, this is what it looks like trimmed back. I drilled this last hole out here. Skinz gives you a handful of 5/8 head rivets. to reattach the belly pan. So this one's going to go in here. Okay, I drilled the holes for the block off plate. As you can see, I made 2 marks where I believe the plates were that were welded to the airframe running boards, and drilled all the way through. I'm going to pop some rivets and call it good. They're installed. We're going to go ahead and the traction screws can be laid out. You put them wherever you want, as many or as few as you want. I always say put in the bare minimum because you can always add more. If you take them away, you're going to have holes. What I like to do is I like to put one in between each rung and then add each weld on the outside rail. And then I don't put anything on these two. And then from back here, I do 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then as you start getting to the back, you'll see that you don't have a whole lot of options. You're just going to do 2. So I'm going to take a center punch here, make a mark. Skinz provides you with 2 drill bits, a pilot hole and the actual size needed for the traction screws. Use the pilot hole drill first. Okay, so we've got a 1/4 inch driver here, fits these traction screws. Be very careful installing them. If you just force them in, they're going to strip. I have my clutch set so that they don't strip. The outside tube is heavy wall. These inside rungs are thin wall, so these will strip out a lot sooner than these. Don't just go at it with the same settings because it's not going to work. Okay, and again, you put in as many as you want in. You can put as many or as few in as you want. I don't put them up in here for one reason. If you ever get your foot locked up in here and your bottom of your boot gets locked on the traction and you end up bailing, I've seen it before, it's happened to me, you end up hurting yourself. So I don't, ride it that way first. If you think you need them, go ahead and put some in. But that pretty much completes the installation. I'm going to go ahead and finish all these, but you don't need to see all that. So if you need a pair, give us a shout. Thanks.